Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for appearing today. I want to follow up on not follow up Senator Little, but she raised a topic that I want to raise. A staffer in our office visited Mornington Island some time ago. Could you tell me what more needs to be done to ensure food security, including prices, in Australia's remote Indigenous communities?
Just wait for my colleague to come to the table, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Marnie Wettenhall, Acting Group Manager, Eastern Group. In relation to Mornington Island, I'm aware of the store there. That's a privately owned store, and I understand that we are working with them through. They're part of the broader remote food security group, or they're captured in part of the broader remote security group. They have approached us, they've approached the Queensland Government in relation to some of this work, and we are working in partnership with the Queensland Government in that space.
Thank you. So there's nothing concrete at the moment. Is ANAO, Australian National Auditing Office, doing an audit on this topic?
On food security, Senator?
Yes.
So I think prior to you joining us, there was quite a lot of conversation about food security. Over the whole, there is a remote security working group that we're working with states and territories more broadly, and making sure that, we're working with retailers, wholesalers, and what are those distributions and what's the service that First Nations people are getting. So there is that, and we're also working on a national strategy for food security in First Nations communities as well. There is, a range of work going on that we take very seriously, but obviously it impacts more than one community. So it is about what's the whole system look like and keeping an eye on that, and NIAA are doing that.
So ANAO is doing that?
Is
it involved in an audit?
So the ANAO, there was an inquiry into food security, and that was in 2020. So, but not that I'm aware of in terms
Senator,
of ANAO.
That was a House of Representatives Standing Committee on Indigenous Affairs that conducted a food pricing inquiry. To go to the point of the question about high prices in communities, where we've been very well aware of that. The inquiry picked up on the cost of food in remote stores, and the idea that we're working through now is that, as the CEO, Ms. Bruin, advised around a national food security strategy to try and look at other ways to bring food relief and food at a cheaper price to communities, particularly those in remote locations. We're dealing with some 200 stores across 4 or 5 different jurisdictions. It's not necessarily just in the Northern Territory, but it's where we've got remote stores across the country. We're working with jurisdictions to try and alleviate what would potentially be the high cost of food processing.
So just coming back to ANAO.
Sorry, Senator, if I can help with your question.
Sure.
With the brilliance of technology, we've just looked at the ANAO website, and of course the forward schedule for audits is a matter for the ANAO. But what I can tell you is that there is a potential audit in 22-23 on food security in remote Indigenous communities.
Thank you. Anything more you want to add?
I could read the scope out for you, Senator,
That'd
but
be
in the
good.
interest of time... Oh, you would? Okay.
Yeah.
The audit will assess the effectiveness of the initiatives to ensure food security for remote Indigenous communities. Food security falls within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 2 and is critical to improve the nutrition of people worldwide. The Australian Government contributes to food security in remote communities through a number of measures, including the Community Stores Licensing Scheme, legislated through the Stronger Futures in the Northern Territory Act 2002 and administered by the National Indigenous Australians Agency, Outback Stores, and the Commonwealth-owned company within the Prime Minister and Cabinet portfolio that supports retail services for 42 remote communities in the Northern Territory, Western Australia and South Australia. In December 2020, the Standing Committee on Indigenous Affairs released a report of its inquiry into food prices and food security in remote Indigenous communities. The inquiry concluded that despite 3 previous recent examinations of food security, concerns remain and there is an opportunity to learn from the measure put in place to address the COVID-19 pandemic in remote communities. The Australian Government responded to the inquiry in December 2021, supporting or providing in principle support for 10 of the 16 recommendations. And as I said, Senator, it is listed on the ANAO website as a potential audit.
So thank you for that. That's exactly what I was coming to. I'm glad you anticipated it. Is transport, costs of transport and the effective consumer prices a part of ANAO's audit?
Oh, Senator, it's listed as a potential audit, so I think the
Sorry,
scope
potential audit?
but I think the scope of that would be within the remit of the ANAO. So
Okay.
I couldn't answer that
All
for
right,
you,
thank you.
Senator. I apologise.
Thank you for your frankness. What solutions have been considered? I've heard a lot of talk, and that's not being disparaging, but what solutions have been considered so far? What are some concrete things that are happening in the remote Indigenous communities?
Senator, I might get Mr Dyer to talk about the recent things that NIAA have done previously in regards to supporting stores to try and alleviate some of those issues. So I'll get my colleague Mr Dyer to talk to that.
Thanks, Ms Jeffries. Look, firstly, as we did raise before, stores are independent entities. And so with regards to the Food Security Working Group, we do have conversations about solutions that stores and suppliers are implementing. A lot of the conversation so far has been about maintaining pricing with regards to staples. So staples, some of the management companies such as Outback Stores and CEQ, the Queensland State-Owned Enterprise, are trying to maintain the price of staples and pass the price on to non-discretionary items. With regards to action by the Commonwealth Government, we maintain a strong presence in the store management space, particularly through Outback Stores and underpinning stores that have issues of viability through an underpinnings fund. We also have provided the stores funding scheme with regards to $8 million.
Is that like a subsidy?
No, Senator. Unfortunately, we don't do subsidies, but we are looking at how to put additional resilience in the supply chain.
Well, what does that mean?
So that stores can engage with, in a sense, larger components of the supply chain. So a simple example would be providing a forklift, so a small store can move from small deliveries to palletised deliveries, allowing themselves then to obviously access bulk purchasing, discount prices, this kind of thing.
I asked particularly about subsidies because my conclusion from seeing subsidies, wherever they're implemented, they raise prices. Whether it's childcare or anything, they just raise prices, which is basic economics.
So, Senator, a lot of the grants that were provided through that scheme actually went to things like storage, for instance, so cold storage, solar power, those sorts of things that actually small stores might struggle with keeping enough food fresh and be able to get it in bulk. And obviously solar is a cost benefit as well, and that might be able to flow through in terms of the cost pricing structures. But there was a whole range of grants given to stores through that process that actually went to their viability as well as the quality of the food that they would be providing.
We'll get onto the details of solar some other time. That's something I don't agree with you on that. The figures don't bear it up. But anyway, they're getting...
Are you nearly done, Senator Roberts?
I've got quite a few, actually.
Okay.
What is being done to encourage... Is there a need to come up with some way of improving competition, or is it even possible in the remote communities? Certainly not in some, I guess.
It's certainly. I think you raised a good point, Senator. It is size of communities will determine if there is the necessity to have competition. And invariably, if the community is small enough or is small, if there is competition, it will close out one shop against the other, and then we see things start to come back in that again. So competition is probably unlikely in a lot of these communities, just because of the sheer fact of the size. Although we do have in some of the bigger communities where there's a population of more than 1,500 people, 2,000 people, there is 3 or 4 shops, stores in the community for choice for people to go to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, that's encouraging. But there aren't that many communities that are over
There aren't that
1,500,
many
2,000.
communities that have that size of population, so they are either centred with one store, or they have to travel to the community that's in close proximity to access the store, because they may not be big enough to have a store themselves.
Thank you. What's being done to encourage communities to grow their own food, fruit and vegetables, and raise herds of meat-producing animals or dairy herds to provide locally produced food? And I understand the climate we're talking about is not like here in Canberra or in Brisbane even, but it's quite difficult. But what's being done so that communities become more independent rather than dependent?
Quite often we respond to communities who wish to want to take on things like market gardens, or working with groups like Food Ladder, etc., that kind of stuff. So we will work with communities who want to be able to. We understand, Senator, that the production of food locally can bring cost relief to households, particularly those that are on fixed income. So any way that we can try and bring down the cost of food or access to food at a cheaper price, certainly we respond to that. But my colleague Ms Wetnall can talk a bit about market gardens, particularly in the Gulf country in Queensland.
Yes, thank you, Senator. In Mornington Island, we are working with the council there in relation to establishing a market garden. We've provided some funding to start a feasibility study. We expect that.
Where is that, I'm sorry?
On Mornington Island. We expect that feasibility study to conclude in November this month, so we're awaiting that to see what the next steps are. In Doomadgee, the community development provider has been working with community there and established a market garden or an aquaponics centre there, and that's moving forward. And we also have some work done, we're doing some work with the Yarrabah community and have completed a feasibility study there.
So Mornington was going to be further down on my questions. I understand there's a proposed garden there, market garden.
Yes, that's what.
So
that's what we're working with.
That's been something we've been told about for a couple of years now, at least. And so all we understand now is that it's still an overgrown field, no plan, no overseer. And you mentioned a feasibility study.
That's correct. There's also some work that the community development provider has been doing, and they've actually have established a small market garden there that is actually selling a number of commercial plants. So there is some action on Mornington Island, a small, but there's also plans for a larger one, and we are working through. There's some complexities around soil and water and things that have to be considered, and that's all been worked through as part of the feasibility study.
What about something like a fishing industry?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Senator Roberts. I really do need to wind you up.